it's time for part two of our program, and to help facilitate and moderate the panel discussion today, I'm happy to introduce my friend and the Executive Director of the Environmental Health Project, ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Allison Steele.
Thanks so much, Doug. And thank you, everybody, for dialing in today. Thank you to all of our presenters for sharing details about your work. I'm really grateful to have this opportunity to hear about all of these distinct efforts related to air quality happening at various levels in and outside of government, looking at identifying risks related to air quality and also developing solutions. And that's one of the things that the Environmental Health Project is focused on, is developing solutions in the public health policy arena. So now that we've laid this groundwork with these presentations from the EPA, the DEC, and from the Environmental Health Project, we're hoping to take the remaining time in this webinar to have more of an interactive discussion to provide an opportunity to hear from you, the audience, specifically policymakers and decision makers, about what can help you make more informed decisions when it comes to air quality. We are running a little bit behind schedule, so we're going to have to trim the scope of that discussion a little bit. So to that end, I'm going to be asking some more targeted questions for both of our panelists and our attendees. For our attendees, we're hoping to hear from you about what was surprising or new in what you heard in today's presentations, what types of data would be helpful for you in your line of work, and even what tone or framing of that information do you think would be particularly effective when engaging your colleagues. While you're thinking of that, I am going to start by posing a question to our presenters, same question for everybody, and ask each of you to speak to specifics of how you either engage or hope to engage with your audiences or stakeholders. So specifically, how does or how do you believe your work should inform policy making, public decision making, and at what level of government? And to the extent that you can, I'd be curious to hear about what you see as the biggest value that your work can provide, and what are the biggest obstacles you see in getting the information that you have into the hands of decision makers who can use it. And so we could just go in reverse order. So I'll pass the microphone over to Nathan.
Thanks, Allison. So yeah, a lot of different, I guess, related questions there. Ways in which I think this information can really be useful. The information of the sort that EHP generates is, in responding to emergencies or specific events that are concerning communities near them. We have a good amount of experience with this in other parts of the country, but it also comes up in New York as well, that people in situations where something is going on and they're looking around for guidance on, what they can do to protect themselves and their families, or, is this bad enough that I need to, stay inside and not, go to the soccer game or something like that. That kind of guidance is, really important for families to be able to find. And it can be difficult to really understand who's in charge of communicating that and making that call, recognizing the great efforts in that arena from folks at the DEC and EPA as well. I think that being able to engage folks at the very local level is incredibly important. People at schools, folks at hospitals and healthcare providers, to be able to ensure that they are paying attention to this information and know how they can use it and act upon it. I think is really important, and one of the struggles of making sure folks are educated in what they can do and what is wise and based in medical research. I hope that answers the question.
Great. Thank you, Nathan. Margaret, any thoughts?
Sure. So we use air quality monitoring data every day in our jobs here at DEC, and I'm sure EPA does as well. We do use that data to help inform and guide us in regulation that might be needed to help reduce pollutants even further. It also helps to prioritize what areas or what pollutants are most in need of corrective actions. It gives us a good overview of what the air quality is in the state. We use it every day to inform the public about the AQI, and we use, and to forecast that information so that people can make informed decisions about their daily lives. It also can help inform what you can do to reduce pollution as well. As I mentioned in my presentation, a lot of the sources of air pollution are not what we would consider as point sources. A lot of those sources are things that you and I do every day, like drive our cars or buy things that need to be trucked to your community. So reducing your energy use, reducing your emissions from vehicles, things like that are important. And I think more and more we do need to help educate the public about where to find reliable sources of information and to help understand what we can all do to reduce pollution even more.
Great, thank you. Anahita, Rick, any thoughts on this front? I'd be particularly interested with your view of maybe getting some of this information into the hands of legislators or other decision makers, and not to put you on the spot, but just curious if you see particular opportunities or obstacles in being able to translate the information that you have into more health protective policy.
I can take a start. Yeah, and actually we're prohibited from giving suggestions to legislatures, so I won't answer that one. But I think what I would say is I think what we would emphasize and look for is kind of the lessons we learned with the wildfire smoke events. I think we were sort of taken by surprise here in the Northeast by those events. And when I say we, I mean EPA Region 2. And because we're very familiar with the AQI and the Air Now website, and so I think I would just emphasize that as simple as seeking out that information from Air Now, it goes a very long way, and whatever other agencies or local local leaders, decision makers can do to amplify that. I think that goes a long way because we don't need a wildfire smoke event to find out what our air quality is today. During the summer, there's air quality alerts for ozone in downstate New York, but but it doesn't get any publicity because we've had ozone non-attainment for 30 years. but those are bad air quality days, and there's simple things that individuals and families could do on those days as well. Just because you don't see the smoke and you don't smell the smoke doesn't mean the air quality is good. A lot of our pollutants are occurring at microscopic levels, and so we I think there could be um, events of a lesser obvious danger, but there's still danger there. And I think Nathan mentioned schools. There's actually, there's a learning moment there that EPA has I think it's called Flag for School program, which basically has we provide flags in the different colors of the AQI, and then the school administrators, they have the students raise the flag depending on what the forecast is for air quality that day. So I think, as far as the source of the information, I would go to Air Now. I would go to New York State DEC and their forecasting. That's what my staff does. We go to New York State's forecast for the air quality alerts, and then just simple things like, based on what the forecast is for that day. Do you exercise in the morning, or do you exercise at night, or do you stay indoors in the middle of the afternoon? um, do you not go to the gas station to fuel your car? So we know cars are necessary, but just the time of day that you fuel them can make a difference. So I think it's just amplifying those simple things.
I'm sorry, I wasn't sure if you were waiting for me to. I agree, and
Sure.
I think public outreach and education at all levels, from young all the way up to adults, is absolutely important. So the more we can do of that, just awareness and education. So I second all of that. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all of you for your answers to that question. As I mentioned before, we planned on having this be a little bit more of an interactive discussion. We are running very close to time, so I've consolidated a range of questions into probably one big question, facing in the other direction to our attendees. We probably won't have time to call on many people, but I would encourage you to, I'm going to put a question in the chat for everyone. I would encourage you to respond in the chat. And if you would like to speak with a little bit more context, you're welcome to raise your hand, recognizing that we're probably only going to have time to hear from one or two people at this point. But for the audience, and particularly for decision makers in the audience, based on what you've heard today, what do you think are the biggest information gaps that you still have, or that your colleagues still have, related to air quality as you do your jobs? What are your biggest questions coming out of today? What would you like to hear more about from an air quality data standpoint in the future, and what types of data would help you do your job more easily, or make your job more effective? And happy to open that up if in our last couple minutes there's anyone who would like to speak to that. Otherwise, you're welcome to respond to that in the chat as well. And sorry, we don't have quite as much time as we had originally planned for an interactive discussion here. But while people are thinking or typing about this, I do want to mention, just to reiterate what Doug had said at the beginning of the webinar, is that we are going to be circulating a survey after the webinar is over. That's got a couple questions that will certainly help us identify topics for future conversation. This is certainly just a starting point for this conversation. There's a lot of really useful data out there that can help support more informed decision making. And so the more that we can bridge those gaps and make those connections between people who are out gathering information, gaining insights, and those who are part of the public policy, public health decision-making process, the more effective that work is going to be as we continue to communicate with each other. And I know there have been some questions coming through in the chat. We've been monitoring that. Unfortunately, we're not going to have time to get to those today either, but we are saving the chat, and we're going to be following up with answers to common questions and also insights from the discussion. I would very much like to thank everyone who has contributed to the chat with questions and information about your work during the presentations today. I'm not seeing any raised hands. It looks like we don't have anybody who wants to go into the spotlight and speak to their own experiences, but we have gotten some responses in the chat. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much, Allison. Thanks so much for being part of this. We did have a question. You know what? While we got everybody here, and I'm going to push the boundaries of the time here. We had a question from Mary Finnegan, who also raised her hand, and I just want to ask. She says, "How are air quality permits decided, and what's the difference between a Title V or an Article 19?" Anybody on this panel ready to answer that question? Is that a Margaret question, or is that a EPA question?
I can tell you, I'm not sure what an Article 19 is, that we don't refer, maybe Article 10 is something she's talking about, which would be specific to power generation facilities, and there are specific regulations and legislation for that. Title V facilities are our largest air permitted facilities, and it's based on an emissions threshold. So facilities that are above, it's 100 tons in the upstate area, and Rick, you're going to have to remind me, 25 tons in downstate?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. So it's really those Title V's are our biggest facilities. We also have state facility permits and registrations for the smallest.
Is that data that's reported by the facility itself? I mean, you're not going there and monitoring it, are you?
Yeah, so we permit those. They come in, they have, if they have a permit, they have reporting requirements. Some need to have continuous emission monitoring or periodic stack tests. We go on inspections of those facilities, and the permits are renewed. So that is mostly handled by our regional offices. All of our permits are on our website. We have probably the easiest way to get a hold of that is we have something called DEC Info, DEC Info. It's an interactive map that allows you to get a lot of different information from DEC, including our air permit information. And I think you can even link to some of the monitor data that way.
We also had a question about lawnmowers and other lawn equipment. Is that something that DEC regulates, or is that EPA? Go ahead, Rick. I can see you're ready to answer this one.
What EPA does, and this is done nationally, is we establish requirements for types of engines that are used in that equipment. So we don't necessarily have controls or emissions measuring or anything like that on like a particular lawnmower, but there are requirements about the manufacturing of engines for that type of equipment. And then there are jurisdictions. I don't think New York State regulates lawnmowers and leaf blowers.
I know there are some communities.
Not currently, no.
There are some communities on Long Island that have, I think, enacted
Yeah.
some sort of regulation around that. But I'm sure many people on this webinar were as startled as I was with Pete Harcum's comment about the amount of emissions that come out of a two-stroke, blower as compared to driving a truck from, what was it, Texas to Alaska?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
just amazing.
And
Go ahead,
that's, I
Margaret.
would suggest that, even though we don't have a regulation for that, certainly on ozone advisory days, refrain from using those lawnmowers and other lawn equipment that is gas powered, because those contribute to ozone levels.
Such a tough issue because guys are just trying to make, put food on the table and do their job. And we understand that as well. So,
but there's great electric mowers.
Yes, there are. I have one. I have one
too.
myself. It blows the leaves just like any other blower does. Okay, so we are at the end. Thank you so much to our presenters. Thank you, Allison. Thank you, everyone. And I know Senator Harcum is no longer with us. He had to move on. He's a busy man, got other things to do, but I just want to mention that we really do appreciate him. All our friends who attended today, thank you, Ben Levi, our behind-the-scenes guru, for making people magically appear and disappear. A reminder that we will have videos of all the presentations available in a few days as soon as I get them edited. And you will be getting a survey that's going to happen as soon as you sign off here. I think it's going to show up in your inbox. So that's not junk mail. Don't ignore it. Please fill out, it's 4 questions. It won't take you a long time. So we hope you'll do that. That will help us plan future webinars like this. If you found this one useful, I hope you'll let us know. If there were things that we missed the ball on, don't hesitate. We got thick skin. We can take it. We're used to public comments. And I'm sure our government agencies are used to that too. But please let us know how we can make a more have another webinar and have it more targeted to exactly what you want. Thank you, everyone who participated today. Thank you, everyone who attended today, and have a great rest of the afternoon.